I'm Damien the DM from Adventures in Aurelia, a collaborative storytelling experience told through a game of Dungeons & Dragons, part of the GonnaGeek network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other epically geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
This is the official GonnaGeek.com show. Here we run down the latest news and happenings in the world of geek. These are your hosts for the show, Steven, Chris, and SP.
Welcome to episode 413 of the official GonnaGeek Show, or at least that's what the show doc says. I am Steven, and I am pleased to say this is your June 2024 edition with Chris Farrell.
I'm actually from the future. I'm Chris from June 2025.
And also from 2030 is SP.
I'm a little bit tepid to be here today, boys.
Uh-oh. Why are you
Anyone
tepid?
who heard the pre-show, that's for you.
Hey, we're here to talk about some geeky stuff. It's a bit of a shorter show this month. One day I'll remember that this is a monthly show now, but we are here to talk about some podcasting stuff. No, wait, that's not us. That's the Better Podcasting Show, which tomorrow we will record our 300th episode. Do you like how I worked that in there?
That was slick.
I mean,
That was the smoothest shameless self-promotion I've ever seen on any podcast. And I podcast with Willie Nelson.
Oh.
He's the king of smooth.
But seriously, if you didn't know that, we do other podcasts on the GonnaGeek Network. So if you want to check out SP and I talking about podcasting, you can check that out over on Better Podcasting. If you want to check out Chris with his awesome co-hosts, including the aforementioned Willie, you can check that out on All Things Good Nerdy. And if you want to see SP a couple times a year talk about Marvel, you can check that out on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D.
You guys see what I did there? I planted a seed to shamelessly self-promote, didn't do it, and had Steven do it for me.
I know. I didn't do it either.
See?
He just kept on
All
rolling.
I did was plant that little seed in Steven's mind to shamelessly self-promote my stuff for me, and he did it.
Well, you know what
thank you.
happens, though? Sometimes you plant seeds, and the seeds they start to grow, but then eventually the plant dies. It's just something about it doesn't take, and you planted the max seed in me, and I am back on Windows now, so that seed did not grow.
There you go. That's what I needed to talk to you about later, of whether or not you were back or you were still in the Mac forest.
No,
Do you want me to just go get my Chromebook out? I podcast on that to really mess with you?
I thought you were
Change things
using your Chromebook.
I have used it to podcast before because
Yeah?
I needed the ability to move around freely.
Well, let's go on to the news, because in our chat, by the way, we do stream this live to GonnaGeek.com/live, but in the chat, we do have Kent saying that the seeds sometimes become spin-off podcasts, and we don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now because we've done enough spin-off podcasts over the years.
We have.
Yeah.
All right, let's start off with some space news, because I heard, and this is a birdie that told me this, but I heard that everything is perfect in the world of space exploration right now.
Everything is perfect. Matter of fact, talking about spinoff, there was a spinoff rocket that launched today, an hour before we started recording. The Falcon Heavy launched the NOAA GOES-U satellite into orbit. It is right now traveling to its position in geosynchronous orbit, and it is going successful. So yes, everything is successful in space flight right now. Everything. Well, maybe not everything. We'll get to that. We'll get to it. Okay. In the past couple of weeks, there's been a lot that has happened in the realm of space. I'm not going to have a chance to go over everything today. I'm going to hit a couple of the highlights. The first is on June 6, 2024 at 8:50 a.m. Eastern Time. Starship Flight 4 lifted off from the orbital launch mount in Boca Chica, Texas. And there you go. There's your drinking game. Boca Chica, Boca Chica, Boca Chica, Boca Chica. There you go. Get your drink, Chris.
I mean, it's just water. I can't have the good stuff anymore. I'm old.
Yeah. Welcome to the old club. So Flight 4 used Booster 11 and Ship 26. Booster 11 successfully lifted Ship 26 and then returned to the Gulf of Mexico for a simulated tower captured landing in the Gulf. And they released video of it a couple of days later. It was glorious. Did you guys see that simulated landing? Did you guys see it?
I did. And I want to know, why did you say it was glorious? Because I don't think it was just glorious. I think it was like Klingon glorious from DS9. They said that all the time.
Was that a Martok impression?
That was. Yeah, it was.
I like it.
Chris, I thought you said you were going to say it was going to be tepid.
No, I like space stuff. It's cool.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, it actually simulated landing. The Flight 3 came down pretty hard. It was because Elon admitted to in an interview that he did right before the flight, but just came out in the last couple of days with everyday astronaut Tim Dodd. He admitted that they were not able to pressurize the tanks enough to get the rocket engines to actually fire off. They fixed that problem with Flight 4, and they actually got it to simulated land. It was caught on camera. It was caught via an airborne camera. It was caught via a buoy camera. So they released that. That it was also caught by its own camera as it was looking down. So they released that video after the fact, and it would look perfect. It came down just nice and gentle, hit the ocean, and then eventually tipped over once it was, stable, or, it had stopped moving. Basically, it went over. That was one of the success margins for the flight. And then the next one had to deal with Ship 26. It continued on into a suborbital free return trajectory and re-entered streaming live the entire time over the Indian Ocean. And the streaming live was due to Starlink. It's an amazing capability, as well as the fact that the high gain antennas with the EHF bands that Starlink works on are on the top of the Ship 26 or the Starship, so it can communicate back and forth to Starlink the entire time outside of the plasma field that's affecting the spacecraft. So we got to see all that just the same as last time. It made it through peak heating of re-entry, and we thought everything was going to be fine. And then all of a sudden, the camera started getting occluded because stuff was coming off. Tiles were burning up, and metal actually melted and came up to the camera. The camera cracked. The camera had all sorts of stuff. It's like watching a NASCAR race, except for there was no windshield to, wiper to blow it off.
And
so
it was like 30% less redneck.
It was a lot less redneck. It was over the Indian Ocean. So it was, we thought it had made it through reentry, but it wasn't going to be able to control itself. Well, it did. Miraculously, this flap that was like hanging on by a thread, it not only worked, it actuated, it flipped back and forth, and it did the flip and burn maneuver. The engines fired, and it did a simulated landing in the Indian Ocean. Now, because of the flap that was disintegrating, it went long a couple of miles. There might have been some other things contributing to that. In the interview that dropped today with Everyday Astronaut Tim Dodd, part 2 of the interview, Elon Musk admitted that one flap was the issue, that not all the flaps had the similar issue. It was because they had put different depths of tiles all over it, and that had the most chance of burning through that particular spot. So they found the weak spot, and they are going to fix it for Flight 5. But everybody was just calling this flap the little flap that could, Flappy, Flapper. It was so great for a few days. I'm still psyched about it. That flap hung in there. It actuated. It actually landed with everything. And then the ship fell over and sank in the Indian Ocean, as it should. So success part 2. Made it through the heating of reentry, although a little damage. But there was no stipulation on damage. Did it make it through, and did it land? Yes, it did. So success.
Well, I have to say, the videos that came out of it was absolutely incredible. Like you said, Starlink just it has brought a whole new level of imagery to some of these flights. It's incredible. And there was another company that will leave nameless that had a bit of a launch happening. We'll leave them nameless for a few more minutes. and it was pathetic in comparison of the video that was available. People were comparing it to the 90s, and I thought that was generous.
Yeah, and I watched the Starship or the Falcon Heavy launch that happened an hour ago. SpaceX did not stream it. NASA did. And I was like, NASA. Ugh. NASA is not it wasn't as bad as that other launch, but at the same time, it wasn't as great either. So everybody has a bar. The bar's been set by SpaceX, and everybody needs to climb up that bar because, yeah, it was definitely not the same. Anyway, SpaceX learned a lot during the flight. And right now they are making changes to the launch site. They're actually constructing a second launch tower as well. I don't think it's going to be ready for the next flight, but they're making changes and modifications and corrections and repair to the orbital launch mount, the first one. They already have done this. They took off all the tiles of the next ship, and they're in the process of putting all the tiles back on. The last pictures I saw yesterday or the day before looked like the ship was at least half covered, if not more. And they did put an ablative layer down underneath the actual tiles. It's an ablative layer that SpaceX already has experience with the bottom end of Falcon 9 as it's coming down. It's the same ablative layer that they use, and it should be good enough in addition to the higher depth, more depth, the bigger tiles, I guess. The trade-off is the fact that the tiles will be a little heavier, but it'll be able to survive re-entry. So they're not trying to catch ship next time, but they are going to go ahead and try to catch booster next time. They're doing a test right now. I'm watching it as we speak on my fifth monitor. They're doing a test or preparing to do a test with using tank 14.1 to see if everything aligns and that the arms can take the weight as the booster comes down on it. So if everything goes well, within a couple of weeks, probably by the end of July, we will see Flight 5, and there'll be a catch attempt with that. And also, we hope to see more amazing stuff from the ship. We'll probably have more cameras on the ship. It'll probably make it down to the Indian Ocean next time, and we will be able to see everything. The ship went long, so if they did have cameras pre-placed to watch the landing, we didn't see it just because it was a couple miles away, but they're hoping to hit the target next time with all the data they have. So very successful day on June 6th. 2024, and I'm looking forward to the next date, whether that's July or August. It'll come in the next couple of months, so it's very cool. I want to ask both of you, did you have a chance to watch this live, or did you just see snippets afterwards?
I saw snippets afterwards. I didn't have a chance to watch it live.
I watched it live.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Was it cool? Were you like rooting for Flappy as it was coming down?
I was so happy for Flappy.
Yeah. And the SpaceX employees were just going wild too. So it was really millions watched it on the internet. A lot. It was a highly viewed spectacle.
Just like Starliner.
Yeah. So Starliner.
I see what you did.
So for those that don't know, after the space shuttle ended, there was a NASA competition to find a replacement just to shuttle astronauts, no pun intended there, back and forth to low Earth orbit, and to have a reusable capsule that could be flown commercially and not within the auspices of the government. SpaceX had Dragon, Boeing had their Starliner, there was Sierra Nevada that had Dream Chaser, and a couple others that have not gone as far anymore. But you had, in the pandemic, we all watched the crewed demo that went up, and the Dragon crewed capsule, I think, has flown 12 or 13 times, and it has been very successful. Boeing, however, they did an on-crewed test. It didn't pan out. They actually had to deorbit it early. It didn't ever make it into quote-unquote orbit just because there was a computer problem. And that was 2020, I believe, in 2019. And then in 2022, they did the test again. And because of COVID, it lasted longer. The hiatus lasted longer than it should have. In 2022, it met its objectives. It was on-crewed, made it to the International Space Station, came down. Well, fast forward to now, and yeah, they've had a lot of delays with the crewed test. There were some leaks. Actually, the booster that they were using, it's an Atlas V. It's a very, very reliable booster, and it even had some problems. I won't put this against Boeing or the Atlas itself. I mean, even SpaceX has issues every once in a while with Falcon 9. So
you got to be careful speaking out about Boeing. Just saying.
Fair. Well, I mean, this whole thing is Boeing. So Starliner is Boeing. Yeah.
If SP disappears, we know why. It's because he talked about Starliner.
Yeah. So anyway, they finally got Starliner off after about 3 attempts, in between the ship itself having leaks, and it was helium leaking, and I believe hydrazine was leaking as well from some of the other components. But anyway, helium was definitely leaking, and they went ahead with the flight anyway, and the launch occurred on June 5th. So the day before Starship launched. It launched, and then immediately they pretty much started to have problems once they were in orbit. They did dock with the International Space Station. They went to manual enough to be comfortable with it, but they didn't actually perform a manual docking. They had the automated system performing the docking. And oh, by the way, the Atlas V is now out of production. They have enough made to do the 6 flights that have been contracted with NASA to go back and forth to the International Space Station. But that's it. If they fly beyond that, they're going to need to find another rocket, whether it's a new rocket or they contract with SpaceX, because that seems to be the thing to do right now, at least until Blue Origin gets their reusable booster up. So anyway, so far Starliner is meeting its objectives. However, with the helium leaks, which is a rocket engine propellant that they're using for the RCS system, or the reaction control system, it does reduce the total amount of rockets that they can be used in flight. It is still usable. The capsule has been deemed able to take the astronauts back home in an emergency. So they're all good to board and get down, say, like a micromedia strike on the International Space Station. They can use it to come on down. They are literally just trying to get as much data as they can from the capsule right now as it's hooked up to the International Space Station, because once they leave and they deorbit, the leaking part actually gets burned up in the orbit. It's a service module. It gets detached from the orbiter and the little capsule, and you never see it again. So they're just trying to get as much data as they can. They have enough on board for this test flight for 45 days. And this thing is designed for 6 months of a flight or even more. So it's okay there. But in case they figure out that they can't come back with the astronauts, NASA has not ruled out returning the Starliner crew on another capsule, such as a SpaceX Crew Dragon. But like I said, they think it's okay to go for now. It's just not looking good as a public face for Boeing, because it's just not gone well. Versus, if you remember what happened during the pandemic with the Crew Dragon test, it went sparkling clean. It was great. It was phenomenal. And this is just delay after delay after delay. It's very unfortunate for Boeing. And I don't know what they're going to have to do with the thing when they get back down. They're going to have to correct whatever this issue is, because they can't keep on flying like this forever. They need to figure out what the cause is.
2 things. Number 1, if somebody gets a black eye, like, let's say you punched me, SP, in my right eye.
Oh, I wish I could.
I know. So you do that.
Can I get left?
All I'd have to do is just simply turn to the left, and then, you might not notice the black eye. So at least Boeing is like this, because they've got, 2 sides to what they do. They have the space stuff going on, and then they have the airplane. So at least they've only got the one black eye, right?
Which one is the black one? Remind me for a second.
You're going to get disappeared if you keep this up. You got to be careful what you say about Boeing aircraft.
Bad time to be Boeing in any capacity. But I do have to say, I will be very interested to see what happens with this, because, they knew there was a helium leak when they said that they would continue. And obviously, whatever decision that was made, it got worse after. So if they do have to come back, though, on another another private entity's vehicle, that looks bad for business.
It would be, but also you wouldn't want to be the company or the agency responsible for the deaths of a
No.
couple of astronauts.
Exactly.
That's
No.
not something you
Yeah.
want.
You
The
would
PR
not.
black eye is worth it for that when comparing to the PR black eye of bringing them down in something potentially unsafe and kaboom.
No, I agree. But, it would be a black eye, a third black eye, I guess.
Broken nose.
Yeah, broken nose. It seems like they don't have a lot of good outcomes from this. I hope they'll be able to bring them back on the ship. It'll be okay and everything. But if I was up there, I'd be a little bit worried.
Yeah, they are okay to fly. If they wanted to return today, they could. Basically, they're just trying to get more measurements right now. I looked into it a little bit deeper and it's okay. It just looks bad. It's a PR nightmare. I don't know how Boeing is going to come out of this, looking better over time. I do know that they're going to fly again. They got 6 more flights. There's nothing that says they're going to stop, but they do need to find the source of it just to make sure it doesn't get worse. And that's what they're trying to do with the measurements.
Do you think that they could maybe consult with the people who made Voyager 1? Because that seems to be going pretty well.
Yeah, that sucker keeps on ticking. Just one more thing on the space front. It had lost communications. The computer wasn't working. The team that has been working on this for decades, and if you see video of the team, they're older people, and they're not old enough to have been around when the thing was launched, but they're older, and they have made the thing come back to life. The 4 remaining science instruments are functioning again, and it is going to go on for a little bit. At some point in time, the thing's going to go black because it just won't have enough power to communicate back and forth anymore. And it's just, but it is the furthest human-made object from the sun right now, from us. It's the furthest thing that's made it out. It's beyond the heliosphere right now. So it's just soaking up all the data that it can. I'm glad they got it working again. And we'll see how much longer it hangs on.
Until the 24th century when it comes back in Star Trek, the motion picture.
Perfect. I'm glad you went there.
I mean, what a terrible Star Trek movie.
I mean, if you want to get into it more, the books at one point in time claimed the Borg found it and it was Borgified and then sent back.
What was the name of those books? I read that one. That was
in the Shatner one, I think, wasn't
yeah,
it? Yeah,
I think
it was in The Return, I think it was.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah. When Bill didn't want to let Captain Kirk stay dead after Star Trek Generations and wrote his own book where the Borg and Romulans resurrected him to assassinate Jean-Luc Picard. Because why not?
I guess technically he did get author credit for that. Technically.
I mean, he ghost wrote all of those books.
Ghost wrote? You mean people ghost wrote the books for him?
Same difference.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next news point here, which I heard you have pre-ordered an EV.
Yeah, so this is actually breaking news like an hour or two before we started recording the podcast this evening. But for those that are unaware, I've been kicking around the idea of an EV for quite a few years now, back prior to the pandemic, and thought about it a little bit during the pandemic, and things just didn't line up. And then recently I had put down a $100 just reservation for the Rivian R2, which is, for lack of a better term, their mid-sized SUV they'll be putting out in 2026. It's fully refundable. I haven't decided whether I'm actually going to follow through with it or not, but I did reserve a spot in line because I thought it was fascinating. And we did have some pretty interesting Rivian news that dropped. It was announced that Rivian and the Volkswagen Group are doing a groundbreaking joint venture. Their goal to collaborate to revolutionize the EV market, quote, by leveraging Rivian's cutting-edge software and zonal electronics platform alongside Volkswagen's expansive global reach and operational expertise, end quote. They did not announce a new name for this venture or its leadership team. However, Rivian CEO RJ Scaringe said during a conference call it would have 2 co-leaders, each reporting to one of the automakers. So what does this mean? For those that are unaware, Rivian just did a refresh of their current line of vehicles. They took it from being a vehicle that had 17 different ECU components spread throughout and knocked it down to 7, in part to be able to save money on supplies, on chips, and things like that. And it is quite the cut down when you're taking 10 big ECU packages out of a production vehicle. So as part of this deal, Rivian is set to receive potentially up to $5 billion from Volkswagen. That's $1 billion now, potentially $4 billion over the next few years, presumably to use this funding in supporting the production of the upcoming R2 vehicle, the vehicle I spoke about pre-ordering, as well as other next generation models. The goal is to ensure that Rivian can continue to deliver, quote, innovative and sustainable transportation solutions, aligning with the growing global demand for EVs, end quote. So why is this important? I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but there was a lot of doomsaying and concerns over the state of Rivian because they were in that same state that Tesla was with the Model 3, which around the same time as trying to get that is, okay, we got the premium vehicles out. Now we need to cut cost and get that next vehicle out that is more affordable. Going from like Model S to Model 3, for instance, with Tesla. We're going from the R1 to the R2 with Rivian, where an R1 is somewhere between, I don't know, about $80,000 to $100,000 in most cases, going down to the R2 that is $45,000 to start with. In order to scale down to that, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And as you try and lower that price, that's when it becomes more and more difficult for these electric vehicle makers to survive. This $5 billion deal with Volkswagen pretty much ensures that Rivian's going to make it to the point they're going to get the R2 out for sale. They're going to get that mid-level SUV out that gets them to that lower price point that brings more people on board, that are more people that are interested. Plus, they partner with Volkswagen, who has a fairly decent global reach. We did find out some more details about what would be happening with this joint venture in the conference call. All of this comes courtesy of Rivian CEO RJ Scaringe. He said, quote, the way the joint venture has been configured is it's a 50-50 joint venture designed with the two co-CEOs reporting effectively into both businesses. VW's investments will provide capital to help Rivian scale up its manufacturing as it looks forward toward building a new factory in the state of Georgia. This is necessary for us financially, and one of the elements here is that it is also implicit that Rivian's success is important to Volkswagen Group's success. So that's another thing that's going to be very interesting here is Rivian right now has a plant in Illinois. That's where they've been doing all of the R1 stuff. They were going to be building a plant in Georgia, and when they did the R2 unveiling, announced that plans had kind of stalled for that because of budgetary concerns and things like that, because building a whole new auto plant, not exactly a cheap thing. This infusion of cash coming from Volkswagen means they can move forward with potentially building that plant in Georgia to have one line in Georgia that does the R2 platform, another line in Illinois, which is an old Mitsubishi plant they've repurposed to continue the R1 line as they work their way up towards getting to the R3 line, which is effectively their sedan. It's fascinating to see this joint venture, this working together, and I'm curious to see what it means for launching new vehicles using the joint ventures technology. They said that wouldn't be until around the 2030s. So we're still, 6 years away from talking about technology that is both Volkswagen and Rivian combined into one platform. So sorry, go ahead, SP. You're about to say something.
Yeah. So in this venture, who's going to be in charge of making sure that Volkswagen has the proper volt to mileage ratio?
They deserve that.
Presumably the Volkswagen CEO will retain the ability on that one.
Okay, we'll see if this ends up in court or not.
Right.
This gets 100 miles to the volt. No, it doesn't.
So effectively what this comes down to is Rivian's going to be selling the IP of its new zonal ECUs and their hardware level software architecture to the joint venture between the two of them. These ECU chips and the software will then be sold to VW and provided to Rivian or vice versa through this joint venture, meaning the tech that Rivian has, they're going to sell to the joint venture. Joint venture is going to develop it. That feeds back to Rivian, feeds back to VW. They're both going to use the same underlying technology and software in their vehicles. Meaning you'll get some Rivian software on VW vehicles, you get Rivian chips on VW vehicles, and that'll be built on a VW platform. So you kind of, in some people's minds, would be combining the best of both worlds. So effectively it breaks down to this. Rivian's benefits, they get joint venture capital investment that they really need because they're getting to be a bit cash strapped. They also get a way to have chips and software be more scalable and cheaper because they're leveraging Volkswagen's volume through this joint venture. And then VW in turn gets access to an ECU architecture and software that are better than what they have now and will arguably make their EVs better.
I have a theory.
Theorize away, my friend.
This is VW's way of dipping their toes into a potential future acquisition.
I mean, that's possible too. And people had thought that before, though, with Rivian, though, because remember, Ford owned a ton of Rivian stock to begin with. Ford has since sold most of that Rivian stock. And I think the last I'd seen, speaking of Rivian stock, it was at $10 yesterday. And then after this was announced, Rivian stock was up to like 16 or $17 a share. So we've seen a surge in stocks and stock value with the news of this joint venture being created. But it's possible that they might go ahead and try and acquire Rivian. I don't know what that price would be. But if you wanted to go and acquire an EV maker right now who's got some stuff out there, you'd be looking more at Fisker that might be better off doing since it's bankrupt right now. And you could acquire all of that tech for relatively cheap.
Well, I think, though, because VW has done an okay job getting into the EV market with the ID4, right? Like the ID4 is pretty well received as far as reviews and whatnot goes with it. But if they are looking for more options down the road, which I think that remains to be seen for all manufacturers, which way that pendulum's going to swing next. But if they were, I could see them wanting to have like a secondary brand or whatnot that they could own, because a lot of companies have secondary brands and whatnot. And I don't know, does VW have a secondary brand?
I don't know in regards to electric vehicles.
I don't know. Well, just a secondary brand at all. For instance, Toyota had Scion. They also have Lexus. So it's like three brands, although Scion is gone. Hyundai has Hyundai and Genesis, I believe, is their upscale line. Honda
and kind
has
of Kia,
Acura.
kind of Kia in a weird way. So Hyundai and Kia.
Yeah,
Oh,
Hyundai and
I
Kia
thought
are
Kia
like
was a
cousins,
separate
for lack of a better
brand.
term.
Yeah.
Because they share the same platform on their EVs.
Oh,
They're close. It's a weird thing, but continue. Sorry, I cut you off.
Who then are oddly linked to Subaru also. Toyota and Subaru are then oddly linked, which kind of ties in all the rest of those.
Yeah.
right. And then we're not even talking about, and I know there's global politics involved, but we're not even talking about any of the Chinese companies. There's a massive amount of Chinese companies. Some are better than others, admittedly, and it's a gamble both with global politics and with the I don't know, technology that is ever changing in China right now. So it's not just an American or a Western world market with EVs right now. I understand what you're saying though, Stephen, is you can combine a brand. Was it Ford and what was it, Audi? Ford and Audi? Or was it?
No, Audi. Actually, I was just looking this up. Volkswagen's subsidiaries right now include things like Audi and Porsche, both of which have their own EV platforms right now.
Yeah.
I didn't
with
know
the
that.
e-tron and the Taycan.
Well, there you go. I learned something new every day.
So says the Google machine, at least. The other interesting twist on this is that Electrify America is a subsidiary of Volkswagen. And then Rivian also operates and maintains the Rivian Adventure Network, which is their own charging network. And has access to the Tesla Supercharger network now. So we've got some interesting potential network expansion stuff that then could turn into exclusion because certain people may not like these partnerships being developed. Who knows what's going to happen? Could get very interesting.
Well, I look forward in any case to finding out about your Rivian review once you get it.
Well, I mean, honestly, we'll have to see because the base model is $45,000 right now. And we all know that that's a projection. Let's wait and see where we get to in 2026 when they're available to purchase. And part of my thought is I need to wait to see how their network builds out because right now there's nothing Rivian nearby me for service centers or charging. Now you're able to use the Tesla superchargers, but you're not getting service through Tesla. So the lack of service is problematic for me.
You heard it here first. He's 100% committed to buying a Rivian and reviewing it on the GonnaGeek Show.
I mean, if I do it, I'll certainly review it on here.
All right, moving on to our pretty much last news point of the show. I wanted to talk about Matter, kind of, because for those of you who didn't know, this Matter is a universal standard that was announced with a big bang a couple of years ago by a collaboration of a bunch of different smart home companies. And the idea was that they were going to create a platform that they could all be interoperable. And that was what was pitched. And it has been a bit of a fizzle since then, because although there are more devices that are supporting the Matter standard, it's been rocky about what is out there and the way that Matter works, because there are multiple ways that these devices can talk to each other. For Matter, you need a Matter controller. And basically what happens is the Matter controller is the hub of the entire smart device platform. It makes the different devices be able to talk to each other. But you also could potentially have Matter devices that run off of what's called Thread, in which you would kind of need another hub-ish thing called a Thread border router, and a lot of times they are combined. But Matter is different than Thread, and Matter can be Wi-Fi only devices. So why do I explain all of this? Because I came across an article that said that Amazon had upgraded the second generation Echoes, Echo Dots, and Echo Pluses to be a Matter controller, the thing that will allow the Wi-Fi Matter devices to talk to each other, because it does not have a Thread radio in it, but it has a Matter. It now will be a Matter controller. And I know a lot of people, including ourselves, started to get into several different devices in that second generation of Echoes. So I thought that was really interesting, but that's actually not what I wanted to talk about, because as I was doing this search, I ended up looking to see what else was new in Matter, and I came across a sort of related product that I thought would be fun to talk about on here, because Switchbot has a product that does work in a little bit of Matter to it. And for those of you who don't know what Switchbot is a company that really started by making a name for themselves doing smart stuff through retrofitting. As a lot of times people who've gotten into smart homes have replaced devices. So like replacing a light switch with a smart switch, or replacing, if you want to do smart curtain rods, you got to replace your curtain rod. But Switchbot created some devices, like a device that actually attaches to your existing light switch that would turn it on and off. You also have a device that attaches to your curtain rod that will help open and close your curtains. So basically they made a name out of retrofitting stuff to make it smart. But they do dabble a little bit in some unique Switchbot offerings, things that aren't retrofitting. They are actual Switchbot products. And this is where Matter came in. I noticed they just released a new remote control, a universal remote control that can be included with a Matter hub. Now, why I wanted to bring this up is because we have on this show talked a lot about our experience with the Logitech Harmony and how we are all surprised that it's still going to this date. We're all waiting for the servers to go down and it to go away. And so we always look at some of these different remote controls. Well, this does act as a universal remote control in that sense, but they really put a bit of a smart focus on it, meaning that they demonstrate how you can have different scenes programmed into it. They talk about if you have different Bluetooth smart devices, you might want to pair them to the remote as well. Really, it looks like they're targeting the primary user base, being the people who have a bunch of devices around. Maybe they want a more physical, regular style remote control for them, but doing a whole bunch of different things rather than having your Hue remote and then your remote for your, your Wink stuff, because I'm sure people still have that, having a bunch of different
still exist?
I don't know, but having a bunch of different remotes around. They're trying to make a universal remote that seems to target the smart aspect. And I could definitely see that being a case, especially with people who might be a little less tech savvy. They really have a hard time trying to pull out an app every single time. They just want to activate their smart Roomba by the push of a button. And so I thought that was interesting. The actual physical buttons on it don't look like it would actually work that well for things like the TV, but they do talk about the idea of pairing it with an Apple TV. I think they talk about another platform, but they clearly are trying to bridge that gap between a remote that will control your smart devices, but also potentially be an entertainment remote. But the physical buttons, there's no keypad or anything on there. So I guess it really depends on what you're looking at for your entertainment physical remote needs. That's the problem I've always had with some of these remotes that have been out there that will do entertainment, but it's not they're like it doesn't have keypads and stuff on there. I find that that's a little hard myself because I like to have keypads because I still have regular TV. But anyways, I wanted to throw this out here because it kind of covered a couple different topics that we've talked about on this show here.
That is cool. And that's the thing I've seen with a lot of these Harmony replacements now is they're all getting into that of, no, we'll not just control your TVs, we'll control your thermostats, we'll control all of your other smart devices. And the problem is that you never see a good review of this being done to be able to see whether you want to drop the $300 to buy one of these devices to integrate it yourself. And I'm not quite adventurous enough to be like, I'm going to drop $300 or $400 on a smart remote right now to try and tie this to my whole ecosystem, because I did it once and I kind of got burned with that sofa baton one that I just couldn't get things to work how I wanted it to. And the problem is my Harmony just does what I want it to do, and nothing else is that easy right now.
Well, aren't you in luck? Because a Switchbot Universal Remote is listed as $59 without the Matter support. With the Matter, it's $109. So there you go.
That's more around the price range of where I'd be willing to buy it just to F around with it and see if I can get it to do what I want.
As long as it can control a smart TV, which not Logitech is kind of failing when the smart TV is working off of a different OS system, say like Roku. As long as it does that, and it should, then I'm all for it. Now, you're giving away a lot more data with everything that's been integrated into it.
Sure.
So they're going to have a large secondary data market for you because they'll be able to tell how often you use different smart devices, how often you listen to certain things, how often you watch certain things, that sort of thing. And that data is, of course, valuable. And they're going to be able to absorb it and move on. And I think that's a failure of Logitech. They could have done this. They could have been into the data gathering mode just as much as everybody else is right now, like Google and Amazon and Apple and Android, Samsung, whatever. So I think that if this takes off, they're going to make it just on the data sales alone.
I think the same problem is going to exist here that Logitech ran into, is that super remotes that control everything are just too niche for the most users. So you might get a super passionate small group of people that are really on board with it, but is that group enough to make it profitable to do the hardware, to do the software costs, to keep a website running, for people to be able to pull stuff down? And that's honestly why Logitech pulled their stuff down. And I would argue Logitech made it so easy that people who were less technology inclined could relatively easily get one of these smart remotes. We also have the problem of the tech has changed, and you don't really need those smart remotes as much as anymore because of HDMI, CEC. And when it works, it tends to do it, or people that just live on one box attached to their TV.
Yeah, I suppose. I think that if they enter into a subscription mode, that they stand a chance of lasting a little bit longer.
I mean, Wink's still around. I just saw they're up to $6 a month now to exist.
Well, I've got a dead Wink Hub 2 up there that's draped with my dead Rodecaster Pro 2 power code. That's on a dead Rodecaster Pro 2 box. So that's what's way back there in the background by the curtain.
When are we going to have the Viking funeral pyre for them?
Oh, that's a good idea. Except for that's a lot of toxic, fumes that'll be coming off.
You put it on a boat and push it away. Someone else's problem.
Then you're polluting the environment. Some poor fish is not going to be able to breathe because of all that toxic.
Yes, I'm sure my Viking funeral pyre is really going to do a lot more damage than all these other people have done to the world already.
No, I just came from Wisconsin. Those lakes are actually pretty clean. We've got a side scan sonar on the boat, and I thought I'd be finding a lot of stuff in there, old tires, parts of cars, that sort of. The lake is clean. It's surprising.
Maybe we should load this up so that we can just drop it on Steven's house from space.
Oh, that's a great idea. Just pay SpaceX to drop it off.
Yeah. Steve, express delivery, Steven.
The last thing I just want to throw in the show really quick here is last episode I talked about the Canadian retail chain London Drugs being cyber vulnerable, we'll call it that. And they had made a comment about how they didn't believe any personal data was leaked. And let's just say that seemed like that was very wrong. So unsurprisingly, we were right on that. And it looks like it was, posted. That was a typical thing, threatened to be posted on the dark web. London Drugs said that they wouldn't pay it. And I believe it was all released, or a bunch of it was released. I could be wrong on those specific details. I do know, though, that there was lots of information that was apparently posted out there.
I have a funny companion story to that, by the way. Funny for you guys. So I think I've told you guys, I don't know if the GonnaGeek fandom has known this, but I've told you guys that I've had a car in the shop for warranty service for a couple of months now, right? I told you guys that. I'm going to leave the brand out of this for now. But anyway, so car's been in warranty service, finally got the actual car manufacturer to pony up and pay for the repair. I go out of town, I come back, and we expect to get the car back. Well, they say, car's done, but we've been hacked by ransom.
No.
So we can't give you the car back. Because we have no way for you to pay for it. I said, I'm not paying for it. It's free. So they're like, oh, well, we'll mail you the paperwork in 3 days. We'll see if that 3 days comes true. But even auto dealers, so this isn't the auto manufacturer or the company. This is the dealership group that has been hacked. And like, really? So you can't do service because, oh, no, we can run credit cards. So why can't you give me the vehicle? Well, because there's no paperwork on it, but it's free. So it was an interesting conversation to have for a little while, but I did end up picking up the vehicle.
Oh, ransomware. It's amazing like how unprotected some of these companies seem to be.
Yeah, car dealerships. It's like, and then we were talking about, I guess hospitals are getting hit more and more. And the problem with hospitals is they can't even check you in until they pay the ransom. So these groups, these hacking groups that are doing it, they know where the money is. The problem is because it deals with human health, the FBI is prioritizing those. So those groups are being targeted probably more than one that targets a car dealership group.
Kent had a comment in the chat, and can't they manually fill out the paperwork? Manual paperwork. I would bet that a good portion of today's workforce does not even know what manual paperwork is.
Well, right. In the case of the dealership issue, yes, they can, and they have been doing that. The problem is then that maintenance record is lost and not in your computer record. So the next time you go in for the same issue and it's supposed to be covered under warranty, there is no record that they actually did the work unless they put it in after the computer system came up. So it is a long-standing issue.
Plus, the printer to print off the manual form is hacked by ransomware.
No, HP won't let you print because you didn't use HP ink.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, that's going to take us to the end of the episode 413 of the GonnaGeek Show. Please check out all of the awesome podcasts on the GonnaGeek Network, including All Things Good and Nerdy, Better Podcasting, and if you'd like to occasionally hear SP on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Well, no, Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. You could be on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. too. Check out the Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. podcast over there. He does make an appearance every now and then.
I will be making an appearance next month when the Deadpool and Wolverine movie comes out, so that'll be fun.
Perfect. So, for episode number 413 of the official GonnaGeek Show, I'm Steven saying I'm back on Windows. Although somehow I feel like I'm more confused than I ever was.
I'm Chris. I'm laughing about Wink existing still.
I'm SP, looking forward to that catch in Flight Test 5 for Starship. See you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the official GonnaGeek.com show. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or a thumbs up on YouTube. You can always join us for our live recording sessions at www.geeks.live. And remember, you can find our full back catalog at GonnaGeek.com/show. If you're itching for more geeky content, check out other shows on GonnaGeekNetwork.com. Voice work was by Emily Prokop of the Story Behind podcast. That's it for this episode. We hope to see you back again next show.